Amanda, and today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up for 2015. So in January, I read 16 books, but it's not exactly accurate because I DNF'd several books in January. So January was kind of a month of DNFing for me. I'm getting a little bit more ruthless with my DNF because there's just so many books that I want to read, and I feel like it's not worth my time if I am not enjoying a book. So, without any further ado, I'm going to get started. These books are not going to be in the order I read them in. They're just however they are in my pile. The first book I have is Living Dead Girl by Elizabeth Scott. This is about a girl who gets kidnapped and is treated horribly, and it's just one of those books that I have very mixed feelings about. I did not give this a rating because I just don't really know what to rate it. Usually I rate books based on how entertaining they were, how much I enjoyed them. I was not entertained or enjoyed this book at all, so I couldn't rate it. I don't even know that it's a good book to recommend because it just didn't feel like there was a point to the story. It just was sad, and I felt like it was sad for the sake of being sad, and it was very hard to read, especially being a mother. Reading about this was just really difficult. It's under 200 pages, it's short, and that's about all I want to say about it, so that's the first one. Then I read Celevision by Augusten Burroughs. This book started out so good and was so interesting and funny. It's a satire about a home shopping network called Celevision, and I enjoyed it in the beginning, but then it started going in a way that I just don't like, and there was a stereotypical Christian person in the book, and I hate that because the stereotype for Christian people is not true. There are people out there like that, but the majority, if you get to know real Christians, they aren't like that. And I get offended and kind of frustrated when I find that a lot in books. And I see it in books so much. And that wasn't the main reason I got sick of this book. It was just some of the things that were happening were just out of control. There was adultery, and then there was like statutory rape kind of stuff, and it was all to be made like as a joke, and I didn't find it funny. So I ended up giving this book 1 out of 5 stars. I did read the whole thing, but towards the end I just skimmed it. So it started out great. It could have been so good, but it was just too offensive and it went in a way that I didn't think was funny. I also read If You Find Me by Emily Murdoch. Now this one I really enjoyed. It's about a teenage girl who is found in the woods with her sister. Their mother is addicted to drugs and has gone off for several weeks, and they get found, and they end up going to live in normal society, and they're really having to adjust to this life because all they've ever known is this little camper in the woods. It was just very interesting and a unique story, very well written. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 5 stars. I also read the entire Eve trilogy in January. I read Eve, Once, and Rise by Anna Carey. I enjoyed this trilogy a lot. I found it very interesting. It's a dystopian society where there's a lot of orphans because there was a big virus outbreak. A bunch of people died and a bunch of children were left. So the children are taken to these schools, and when they graduate, they're supposed to go learn a trade and go live in the city of sand, which is this big fancy city. But that's not exactly the case. Eve finds this out and escapes. I found it very interesting. I enjoyed the story a lot. I enjoyed the second book the best, Once, which is this one, because the city of sand was actually what Las Vegas used to be, and I just thought that was interesting. I love when dystopian stories refer to things that we have now, but they're all crumbled and gone. So I like that. It was a unique story, a bit predictable at some points, and kind of cheesy at some points, and a tiny bit of insta-love, which drives me crazy, but it didn't drive me crazy too much in this book. I ended up giving all 3 books 4 out of 5 stars, and I would recommend this trilogy. I also read The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. This is an ARC that I got at a Goodreads giveaway, and this book did just come out, I believe, in January. It's a psychological thriller about this girl who rides a train. Surprise! But every day they stop at this one light and she sees this couple and kind of has made up a story about them and who they are. And then something happens and it becomes this mystery. I found it interesting. I didn't love it as much as I thought it would. This book was really hyped up from what I found. And I did find it interesting. They do compare it to they do say it's for fans of Gone Girl, which seems to be the book that everything is compared to now. But I didn't enjoy it as much as that. I thought it was a bit predictable. I was able to kind of predict who the culprit was. I don't want to give anything away, but I was able to predict that before it happened. And not too bad. It was a 4-star book for me. Solid 4-star rating. I did enjoy it. I would recommend it, but it didn't really knock my socks off. I also read The Husband's Secret by Leanne Moriarty. I got this from my library. I really enjoyed this book. It is about a woman who's up in the attic one day and she finds a letter for herself from her husband to be opened after he dies, but he hasn't died yet. And of course, eventually she opens it and finds out this crazy secret, and the story just goes from there. This book was wonderful, as Big Little Lies was also wonderful. I really love Leanne Moriarty's characters. She is so good at creating real characters that are flawed, that are funny, that are just so dimensional and just real. And I definitely loved this book. This book had a character who had social anxiety, and I have social anxiety. I have a lot of trouble with social situations like parties and just get-togethers. I hate those, especially when there's no structure and you're just kind of standing around. I'm not good with that. I'm very uncomfortable in those situations. And there's even a point where this woman in this book who has this kind of wonders if her husband didn't want to be with her because she never wants to go anywhere. And I've kind of thought that to myself, like, what if he doesn't want to be married to me anymore because I never want to go to parties, I never want to invite people to the house, stuff like that. So it just was very relatable and very, very good. And I liked how it was very spot on, this character, because I think some people think social anxiety is you can't talk to anyone and you're a hermit, and that's not true. I work with people every day, and I'm okay when it's a structured situation. It's just certain times that I just feel very uncomfortable and don't want to be there. And I think sometimes people take it the wrong way and they think I'm like stuck up, but it's not that. It's just I want to get out. So great book, great story, and I gave this 5 stars. Then I read a book from my childhood, from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. I read this when I was a kid, about probably 11 or 12 years old. I picked this up. My sister had a copy and it was laying around the house, and anytime I found any books in the house, I would read them. I really loved this story as a child, but as an adult, it just lost a bit of its luster, which is so sad when that happens. And I'm finding that more and more as I read books that I loved as a kid, that they're just not the same when you're an adult. But it still was enjoyable. I love that this book has a very retro feel because it was written, I believe, in the 70s or the 60s even. There's talk about things that just aren't around anymore, and I thought that was fun. The story is basically about a brother and sister who run away from home and go to live in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And it's such a neat idea to live there, and I actually even found myself Googling a picture of the fountain because they took a bath in the fountain, and there's even an illustration in the book. I'll see if I can find it. Here's the picture of them bathing in the fountain, and I wanted to see if the real life fountain was the same, and that fountain is no longer in the Met, but there was a picture of it when it was. And so I thought that was really cool because it looks just like the illustration. So that was fun. Definitely an interesting, fun story, but like I said, I think kids would enjoy it more than adults. Sad to say. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I participated in the Read Your Bookshelf-a-thon, and so some of these books are from that. This is one of them. It's called House of Secrets. It's by Tracy Peterson, and as you can see, there was a lot in this book that I wanted to note. There are so many good quotes in this book. It's about 3 sisters who are adults now, but when they were kids, they saw their dad give their mother, put something in her drink, and that night she died, and they think that he killed her. And it goes into a lot of stuff that happens. So when they're adults, he wants to bring them together, and they want to confront him on what they saw. I found the plot so interesting, but the execution was just not as good. It just was so much dialogue and not very much story. It was a lot of talking back and forth. And although I did find a lot of things very interesting and very good, it almost felt more like a nonfiction kind of book because it talks about, dealing with the things in your life, things in your past. And it was very good that way, but it wasn't very entertaining. And there was this romance that was kind of just thrown in there. I felt like the author just kind of threw it in there just to have it there, but it really didn't fit the story as much. So it was okay, but it wasn't my favorite. But I did enjoy some of the things that were there. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I attempted to read Forget Me Not by Vicki Hines. This is a Christian fiction book. I forgot to note that this is also a Christian fiction story. This is about a crisis center where this woman shows up and she looks just like a woman that died, and it's the woman it's the owner's wife. She looks just like her. And there's like all this underlying stuff going on. There's a lot of like kind of organized crime in the plot, and I just did not find it interesting at all. I could not get into it. So I DNF'd it at page 118 and just wasn't for me. A book for the RibSat that I read that really was for me, that I really enjoyed, was The Longings of Wayward Girls by Karen Brown. I had never heard of this book. I had never seen this book, but I found it at Ollie's for like $1.99 one day, and I picked it up because the cover really drew me in, and the plot synopsis sounded very interesting, and it was great. This book is about these women who played a prank on a little girl when they were kids, and the little girl ended up disappearing and was never found. And so then it's like this mystery of what happened to her and how were they involved. It really had a similar feel to Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. If you enjoyed Sharp Objects, I think you would love this book. I really liked it. I found it very interesting. I felt like the writing style was great. The characters were really interesting. I would definitely recommend this one, especially if you're a fan of psychological thrillers. I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Stranger Things by Erin Healy. This is another Christian fiction story that I ended up DNFing. I thought the subject matter sounded interesting. It has to do with human trafficking. This woman kind of stumbles upon this ring of people who are involved in human trafficking, but I just felt like the story just couldn't get to the point. It couldn't get going. I felt like we were just continuing to set up the plot, and it just wasn't enough to keep me interested, and there was just something about the writing style that I just didn't enjoy. I really felt like it was kind of a laborious writing style where I felt like I had to really focus on it, and I hate books like that. I like to be able to just read them quickly and easily and not have to think through. And I don't know if it's just that I wasn't in the mood for this book or if it just wasn't for me, but I ended up DNFing this one as well. Another book I read was The Snowman by Joan Nesbo. What an amazing book. This is a crime fiction story. about a serial killer who, when they kill people, they incorporate a snowman into the murder in one way or another. If you read this book, you will never look at snowmen the same way again. I just saw a snowman yesterday when I was driving by, and I thought, oh, that's kind of creepy. Snowmen are very creepy in this book. It is so interesting, and I really enjoyed the writing style. I felt very involved with the story. I just wanted to keep finding out who it was, and he is so good at steering you towards the thinking that one person is the killer and then turning it all around. And he did that like 4 or 5 times where I thought, that's who it is. I know that's who it is. It has to be it. No, I was wrong. So, great story. I love that. I love when I can't figure it out. I love when I keep guessing. And I definitely would recommend this book. It is very gruesome, very graphic, and not for the faint of heart, but if you can handle that, I would definitely recommend it. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I also read Trafficked by Kim Purcell. This was for my A to Z challenge, and I found this interesting. It's again about human trafficking, but this wasn't sex trafficking. This was more trafficking for labor, like getting a free maid, basically. It's about a girl who is from Moldova, I believe, which I believe is part of Europe. And she is brought to America to work as a nanny, but she is going to work as a nanny and a housekeeper, but she doesn't realize she will not be getting paid. And once she's there, she's kind of stuck. It was a very eye-opening book and a very important book to read. I think it's very chilling to realize that this does happen in the United States, which is very sad that this occurs and people don't even realize. So I thought it was very important. I wouldn't say it was very entertaining, and I didn't really think it was that well written, but it was an interesting story, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Another book that I read was Ice Trap by Kitty Sewell. I DNF'd this book, and I read it in the beginning of the month, and you know what? This book, I DNF'd it on January 11th. It's now February 5th, and I have no idea what it was about. I cannot even remember. It just was that boring. It really was kind of boring and wasn't that interesting. I was reading the synopsis trying to remember, and I don't really remember very much. So it wasn't very good. I didn't like it. This one's gonna go to the used bookstore. And then I checked out a book at the library. It's called That Night by Chevy Stevens. And wow, this book was amazing. It was probably my favorite book of the month. It's about a girl who is accused of murder of her sister. When the story opens, she is just getting out of jail for serving time for her sister's murder. But she didn't do it, and she wants to find out who did that night, and it was just such a great story. I would definitely recommend this book for anyone who loves psychological thrillers. It did kind of have a bit of a feel of like a Gillian Flynn book again. I really enjoyed the writing style. I was glued to the pages from the very beginning to the very end. Loved that story. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So I just bought another book by Chevy Stevens because I want to read more of her books. They're just really good. The characters were great. Awesome book. And that is it. Those are all of the books I read in January. So I did have a pretty busy reading month, and I did read a lot of good books, and I kind of read some that I didn't like. But that's everything for today. I hope you all have a great day. I am going to try to do weekly wrap-ups. I'm going to try because I feel like that might be a little bit more beneficial to talk more in depth about the books and not have so many to discuss. So we'll see. I can't make any promises, but that is my plan for now. So I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you next time.